up to this point, what we've started to look at is attacking from the rear mounted position. And the idea is that when you're first getting into jiu-jitsu, you have to start somewhere. And if you were to generally split up how you might be taught jiu-jitsu, you could start from a generally defensive standpoint, or you could start from a generally offensive standpoint. Now, a defensive standpoint would be things like bridging to escape from the mount, going into elbow knee escapes, recovering guard, things like this. Totally fine, totally legitimate approach. The idea is generally that, well, you're going to find yourself being the defending player more often than not, especially when you're first starting out, especially if you don't have any inherent physical advantages that you can bring to bear. So in some way, shape, or form, it's not all that unlikely that you're going to just be offensive all the time. So there's an idea that if I'm just starting jiu-jitsu, I might be starting it on a defensive course first and foremost. That's one way to go about it. Again, totally fine way to do it. The approach we've been using is to start from an offensive position where, let's say everything just happened to go right and you wake up one morning, you're on someone's back and you're able to apply a strangle. What would that look like? And what would the sort of priority or the mechanics involve? Okay, and again, there's reasons, there's pluses and minuses to this approach. One of the pieces that I tend to lean into is that it's one of the reasons people get into jiu-jitsu in the first place is because submissions themselves are quite interesting. And if we start with a submission, or even maybe like the archetypal submission of jiu-jitsu, which is strangling someone from the back, you've already grabbed someone's attention, and it's their curiosity will start to guide them the rest of the way. And the other part of this is you need to sort of know where the finish line is, or where a finish line would be, so that you can aim whatever you're doing towards that finish line. If you start with a defensive mindset, you learn to bridge from the mount and elbow knee escape, and you do it absolutely perfectly, you might not have any idea what to do next, and that's fine. It's maybe your first day, first month, etc. But if you learn on your first day that if you can get behind somebody and you can start applying a strangle, that's a good thing. And whatever you're doing, if you can start going in that direction, things are improving. And again, neither one is going to be complete without the other, but given that we do have to start somewhere, we've been starting in this offensive mindset on somebody's back, looking at how to strangle without the jacket, and then with. And then we started adding in the hooks and some of the considerations that you might run into when somebody starts defending, using mostly the hands at this point. What we're going to do today is introduce what I call partner checks. So especially in an environment like this where a lot of this is video and just me explaining, and I'm not able to go over and demonstrate so that you can feel the techniques, we want to have certain checks or markers that we can use to get a better idea of if we're on the right track with our technique, or if we're just totally off and we need to go back to the drawing board. So partner checks allow for us to have one or two things that our partner is trying to accomplish that we're able to pay attention to, and then we know if they succeed, I got to readjust something. If they fail, things are looking good and we can continue to move on. Okay, so we'll introduce a few partner checks today, and this will start fleshing out some of the ideas about what I want to do to attack somebody from the back, and then also what they should be trying to do in order to escape, and give us a sort of full picture of what's going on, at least from the back position. Okay, so the first check that we can use is just with regards to the strangle hand, the seatbelt grip, and the initial position that we've been using with the upper body when we engage and attack somebody's back. Okay, so if I'm here with them and it's the same step that we've been going through, I come in, I start setting a seatbelt grip, always keeping in mind that I want to cover my strangle hand with my support hand. I'm looking for pinky knuckle over pinky knuckle, and I want to be placing my elbow in front of my partner's shoulder here. As I set that seatbelt grip, my head trap comes in and contains her head between my head and my elbow on the far side. Okay, so that's my initial grip. Now, her initial defensive grip against my right hand will be her left hand. And her left hand is going to be supported by her right. So if we just turn a hair bit this way, it might end up looking like this. Here comes my right hand. I keep saying this because on one of these views, I'm flipped, and on the other view, I'm standard. So just so everyone knows, this is actually my right hand, despite whatever it looks like from your perspective. Okay, so my right hand comes up and over the top. my left hand wants to cover that up. Emmy would love it if her left hand could do that instead. That's her defensive movement here. Okay, so I get that going. She's maybe a little bit late. There's her left hand, and then the right hand comes in. Okay, so one more time, just so we're all on the same page, we create a little bit of a stack here. My right, then my left, her left, and then her right. Okay, and then my head trap comes in, and we're ready to go. Now this is absolutely elementary, but it's worth practicing, especially if you're somewhat experienced on one side. Go ahead and just dive in and do the other side. Get used to using your left hand as a seatbelt. If you start looking for it, you'll notice that at the higher and higher levels of competition, people that get finished with these sort of very seemingly basic submissions from the back, very often it's because they're good with their left arm, whereas most are just good with their right, and that has to do with how accustomed my partner is to the defensive reactions. Okay, so here comes my grip, and here comes Emmy's grip. Okay, now at this point, because Emmy has properly set her defensive hands, I should not be able to just break through her grip and go to her neck. So something like, let's say if you move your hands a little bit, this sort of thing shouldn't happen, where I just punch right on through and I'm able to get to her neck. Okay, her left hand by itself, that sort of webbing that forms between her thumb and first finger, that's what's staving off my right hand. Okay, and as she resists me going up with my right, it's not all that hard to do, and I'm not going to be able to break through this. Okay, this is one of the reasons why I'll end up having to go in and strip her grip off in order to progress. Okay, so our very first partner check is just in regards to the grip. Here comes my grip, and here comes her defensive grip. Okay, and we probably do this a couple of times. And you can start to see that not only by just focusing on the left part of her grip, Emmy naturally started to curl her body up a little bit. The rest of her defense can start to become more organized because she's focused on doing one thing very precisely. The rest of the body tends to follow along and help reinforce that. Okay, so that's our first partner check, is my grip comes in, her defensive grip comes in, and we make sure that there's no easy breakthrough for me going straight away to her neck or her collar. Okay, again, that would be either here or into the lapel. Okay, now our next defensive grip we can go into directly, meaning that I'm not going to go through the layers of the hand fight. I'm just going to go to what would be ideal for me in placing my grip and introduce to her what would be the check. Okay, so if I come in and grip and she does not take a defensive grip, so I've got my seatbelt here and I realize, oh, there's no defensive hands, I just go right on to the next step. The next thing I always want to do is just immediately set my strangle hand. That might look like this, where I come around the corner and I put my hand over her shoulder blade. Okay, let's actually turn it up. When I come around the corner, I want to make a false grip and curl my wrist here so that I can cover up my own thumb with my head, like this. Okay, it's even better if I can take this grip and close it around the back of her head and cover that up with my head. Okay, the idea here is that my thumb line should not be accessible to her. In particular, not accessible to her left hand. Now, because of the way that my wrist is bending around the corner in this shape, or in this shape here, it's actually pretty awkward for her to twist and turn her arm around to my thumb here. So usually if I'm going to fail here, the way it's going to happen is, let's say I have my thumb line somewhat exposed, she'll reach and maybe this will happen. Okay? But oftentimes it's her right hand that will come around and get the ball rolling and pulling and pulling. Then a little progress is made and then that left hand comes in. Okay? The reason I point all that out is because just because Emmy's left is her primary defensive arm right here, doesn't mean she's limited to only using this arm when we do our check, or that it has to be this arm first. It's just that when my grip initially comes in, she's hunting for it with her left like this. Should I end up making a breakthrough though, she can use either one of her hands and she's looking to grab a hold of my thumb line and strip my grip off. Now my thumb is pretty well hidden here, so you see she's fishing in, trying to get a hold of my hand. If she gets to my thumb line, it's going to come off. Okay? So our second check is on the strangle hand. Can she get to my thumb line? Using left hand, using right, using a combination of the two. Okay? My strangle hand might be set, one more time, here around the shoulder blade, here around the back of the head, or in the lapel. Okay. Now we haven't talked too much about that lapel grip. Let's turn about 45 for me. We haven't talked too much about setting this grip and all the precise details involved here. I've just given a couple of quick cues on this that I'll go over now. But what you should notice immediately is that my thumb is sort of conveniently hidden inside of her lapel. This is one of the many benefits of using the lapel to attack the neck. So just by the very nature of me putting my hand into her lapel like this, my thumb is very, very hard to access. Okay, and you can give that a lot of priority when you go to the lapel by taking first what I call a junk grip, where I just grab something on her lapel to hide my thumb. That's my priority at first. Okay, I don't need to come in and get an absolutely resolute death grip that I'm just going to finish every single time on my first go around. What I need to do is go, all right, I know she wants to grab my thumb line. Obviously, I don't want that. So when I take my initial grip, I can be a little bit crafty and just make sure my thumb line is hidden. Then maybe I inch my way up a little bit further. And I want to get to a point where if I were to back my head up, I can see at least my index knuckle here. Okay, so this, I know it's hard for you to see through my eyes. It's always hard to do, but I can still see my index knuckle here. So pulling my elbow around the corner to the back of her shoulder, this can actually still produce a strangle. But here, not going to happen. Okay, so my cue here is, can I see that punching knuckle on my index finger? Okay, if I can, I'm good to go. Now that doesn't mean, again, that this is my final grip, but that's my initial grip. That's maybe my junk grip, hides my thumb, there's my index knuckle. Okay, now we start improving it. We bite up to the lapel. I move my head away. Obviously, I can still see my index knuckle, and this would be a great grip for me to use to strangle. Okay. Now, again, with the lapel strangle, another difference between this and rear naked is my head is free to move away when I finish the lapel strangle. So in this check, I don't need to stay here covering my strangle hand with my head. I should be able to move my head away. Emmy comes up with either or both of her hands and tries to pull my hand away. Not going to happen. Now you'll notice that there's a few levels of sort of artificial constraint that we've placed here. Emmy's not moving her torso to try and escape this. That's not what we're practicing right now. We're just practicing setting my strangle hand, and if she's able to access my thumb and pull my grip off. Not going to happen here. Okay. When we start adding in dynamic partner checks, that's when more of the pieces that Emmy's under control of will start moving around, and I'll have to be alert to more of those pieces in order to be successful. But right now we're working essentially static mechanical pieces, one at a time, maybe adding one or two more as we go along, but just so I can get used to getting my hands in the right position and anticipating where she's likely going to put her hands. Okay, so up to this point we've done initial grip, my offensive, her defensive. Okay, maybe we run through that a couple times. And then we went into strangle hand, and this kind of had three manifestations so far. If I come in my initial grip and she has no defensive grip, let's say, I've got initial grip. Our first strangle grip was at the shoulder blade. I cover my thumb with my head. Our second one was around the corner here, and I'm almost touching my own shoulder, my head over my thumb here. And then our third one was with the lapel. Remember that we can go junk grip first to get the thumb hidden, and then inch your way up, making sure that if you were to back your head away, you can still see that index knuckle. Okay? In all of those grips, she can use left, right, or left and right to try and get a hold of my thumb and pull my grip away. Okay, so often we'll go here, and I'll say, hey, Em, can you try and break that grip? Okay, and also one thing to keep in mind, don't sit here and just torture the other person just like 25 minutes of, hey, I'm on my first grip, like, you know, you'll get a sense of if it's going to come off or not. And remember, they're being very patient with you. You're going to switch positions at some point, and you also have a lapel that there yourself. Bear all that in mind, golden rule kind of thing. So we had one, and here's two, and now Em, can you try and get a hold of my thumb line? All right. And three. On three, I might go junk grip. All right, Em, whenever you're ready. Uh-oh. Thumb line wasn't hidden. Almost like we had that plan. Junk grip. Thumb line's hidden. Look at that. Can I move my head away? Can I see my knuckle? Maybe I improve that grip. All right, Em, can you give it a go? And I think 4 examples is probably enough. One other point here is when you set a collar grip, the more slack you permit in the hand, the less you can permit in the elbow. Okay. At some point, you got to take all the slack out. Okay. At some point, you got to twist and wring the towel out if you want to get all the water out. So if my hand is not doing that because maybe it's lower, my elbow will have to compensate. And in general, if we turn this way, that's going to go like this. I'm super low on the lapel. This is an unrealistic grip to strangle with, but to demonstrate my elbow position. It started on the front of her shoulder. If I have a lot of slack in my strangle grip, we're always going to have to pull that elbow behind the shoulder, as if I was going to push her forward, sorry about that, with my right elbow here. And you can see that the forward pushing action here is in the opposite direction of my pulling action with the strangle hand. Okay? And again, that becomes more and more necessary the more slack I have in this grip. If I'm up super high, very tight grip with my hand, I don't have to go very far with my elbow in order to get the finish. Okay? But just keep that in mind. You're going to have to sort of keep those two variables in mind. I've got my grip set to some degree, and I make up for any remaining slack by putting the elbow behind the shoulder. Okay? So up to this point, we've done initial grip, my offensive, her defensive. We've done the strangle hand, and we've done it from shoulder blade, behind the head, and then a couple of the variations that involve the collar. Now what we're going to do is we're going to start putting the hooks in, and we're going to start adding in things that are not just hand fighting. Okay, the first one we'll do is head trap, because this is just something that no matter how much you practice it, you'll want to revisit. Do you have a head trap on your partner? It's very easy to lose track of this as you try to deal with their defensive hands and things like this. And then the other one is very important for stopping someone's defense, for understanding how to defend when somebody has your back. But even more important than that, it helps us understand and build a vocabulary with regards to center line and inside and outside position. Okay, so we'll dig into all these at the same time. Okay, so now we're looking at the back position here, and I've got my hooks in. We've punched our knees forward, pulling the heels in. We're going sternum on the spine. I'm involving my offensive grip, and maybe Emmy does or maybe doesn't have a defensive grip. That's not really what we're aiming at the moment. But I do have a head trap where my ear or the back of my head goes next to hers. Now in general, we start off by going towards the underside here, so that means I'm tilting over to the side. And the very first thing I want to make sure of is that I don't start backing my head away and leaving the frame completely so you can't see me, and then trying to strangle. So we scoot over, and from here I go to the side. What I need to get used to is being able to feel and operate with regards to the strangle, with regards to the hand fight, and feel her head against mine. Always keep in mind, in this back position, you can start placing hooks and body triangles and all these different things. One of her goals is always going to be to get her head around yours, like she wants to put the back of her head on the floor, like this. Okay? And if you've ever had the back mount on somebody and had this exact exchange happen, you know that you have a sense of, okay, something's lost and something needs to change. Maybe I try to mount, maybe I go to another attack, but losing the head trap is a big, big deal. And it's possible for me to recover from this, but absolutely 100% recommend you just get used to not losing the head trap. Okay? It's actually pretty easy to do. You just want to make sure that your head is constantly propping up against theirs like this. Okay? And I don't need to look at any of the hand fight that's going on in order to go forward with some of the things that we looked at with regards to getting around my partner's defense. Okay? So you could do your initial grip, any of your strangle grips that we looked at, and then add in the head trap. Is your partner able to get the back of their head to the mat? Again, as your attention moves through those grips, it's likely that your head will drift a little bit and your partner will want to remind you, hey, your head moved, I got my head to the ground, reset and give it another go. And again, always keep in mind this notion of priority versus mechanical perfection. It's always, always better for me to keep somebody's back, reset my entire attacking sequence, and give it another shot, rather than, maybe this time I'll get it, and maybe they'll get their head to the ground, we'll see what happens. Remember, as you stay on someone's back, they're going to get tired, you're going to start reading their defense and being able to predict it, and things will over time develop in your favor. But you don't want to, in a single moment, allow for, say, their head to get to the floor, and now you've lost the back, now you've got to pass their guard again, and all these different things. If you get somebody's back, you should get a submission. Each time you take someone's back, if you're really fighting them, you should be able to get a submission. Okay, that's a good standard to work with. Okay, so now, let's say we've done all that. We're working on the back here. We've done a good job placing hooks. We've got our offensive hands in position. We remember to set our head trap. We're going off to the side here, and we start placing our legs like we talked about before. That might mean my bottom hook goes all the way across, and then I step on my own foot, or if ever possible, you lock in a good solid body triangle. Now my head trap's in position, and we look at things like going with straight grips to bring the hand below the chest so that I can start using my heel towards my own thumb and trapping one of her arms by putting my shoelaces on her spine. Now we're sort of involved in a hand fight where I've got two hands and she's got one. And I can do any number of things here, whether it be using cross grips, a pass off that gives me a straight grip. But overall, what you'll start to notice is that now I've, at some way, shape, or form, I've gotten rid of both of her defensive hands. One of them is held with my leg, and the other one is held by a straight grip. Now, this grip here can tend to, it can be a little bit hard to keep track of, just like a lot of things like the head trap and the strangle hand. And again, this tends to happen as somebody gets to this point, and they get excited hunting for the strangle hand, and they're trying to free, your partner's trying to free their defensive hand, and they get you to accidentally turn your hand into something like this, where now there's a gap between my thumb and my fingers, and that's always going to be the avenue that Emmy punches her hand out of. Okay, so I want to monitor this position by constantly doing a forward throttle motion like this, and gluing her hand flush to her chest. Okay, because now her hand, or in order to come out, would have to go essentially through her chest, and that's not really going to happen. Okay, so I monitor this. I always check in. How's my head trap doing? And from here, this is obviously, again, a position you don't want to just torture the person with, but hey, Em, can you get your head to the floor? Can you free one of your arms? And if you can hold, or at least maintain, this general structure, you've got an uncontested hand to start punching through on the neck. Okay? And if you are able to do that and your partner is trying to free their defensive hand, trying to unwind their arm from that trap where it's behind the back, and trying to get their head to the floor, if you can keep track of all those things, you're doing a pretty good job. You really only have to get under their chin with some form of grip, lapel, or behind the head, something like this, and you're on your way to the submission. Okay? So I made mention of an inside positioning and reference to a center line. I want to look at that now because, again, it's one of these things where, what have we done so far? We've done offensive grip, defensive grip, head trap, keeping track of their defensive hand, making sure there's no flaws in your grip. There's a lot of stuff going on so far. Then there's one thing that she can always be aiming for, and if she gets it, she's out of there. Okay? And that is her inside elbow going to the floor. This is one of those things, I'll demonstrate in a moment, where if you're in Emmy's position, if someone's on your back and you're not sure what to do, you're not sure if it's my head to the ground now, or what about these hooks? Just take your inside elbow and put it on the floor. The moment that happens, you're out. They're not on your back anymore. They might be moving towards the mount. More likely they're moving towards your half guard, something like this. But all of the defensive objectives that Emmy has can be summarized as she wants to get her inside elbow to the ground. Now, when we say inside and outside, let's make reference to a couple things here. Actually, let's say, can I have a computer? So, if we both have our center line here, inside can change depending on how we move laterally side to side. In general, inside refers to the distance from the center line. Okay? So if I'm on Emmy's back here, and I've got my hooks in here, got my seatbelt, I've managed somehow, miraculously, we've made it all the way to this point, and I've gone all the way through. I've started doing my arm trap here, I've got my straight grip, and I'd just love it if I could get to her lapel. Okay? At this point, Emmy's right arm would be her inside elbow. And if she can make it down to the floor, it's going to take a little bit of movement on her part. She's out of here. Now, it's not the most obvious thing to do at this point, so we'll go over how she might accomplish that. But I want you to keep in mind, all the steps I'm about to describe are just to get her inside elbow to the floor. There will be instances where you can cut out half of these steps. There's going to be instances where you've got to revisit some of these steps a second or third time as the person on offense manages to catch up with you. Okay, so let's say, for example, that Emmy straightens out her left leg and starts using her right knee to start freeing herself from my foot. Now she steps on my foot. She says, get that hook off of me. And then she takes her left knee and slides it on through, being very crafty with her leg positioning here. Now you're starting to see that even though I've got what looked like upper body control, her inside elbow can start going towards the floor. Well, that's a big problem. It's a big problem for you because we're sort of almost out of the frame. So if we scoot a little bit, just trying to keep that same position. Hopefully you can trust me that this is more or less the position we were in. I've lost the back position. Literally, my sternum is not on her spine anymore. I might be able to come up to the mount. That's going to be kind of tough. Most likely I'll start coming up and Emmy will lock me in something like a half guard here. Okay, this is a totally realistic way for her defense to play out. I was on her back. She managed to start working her defense, and as I tried to recover the positioning, I ended up in her half guard, and perhaps we end up in a position more or less like this. Now, why does that happen? It's because when Emmy takes her right elbow to the floor, or maybe her left elbow from the other side, she's accomplished half of an elbow-knee frame. Okay, if her elbow and knee can touch each other in any position here, if I just say, hey, go ahead and touch your elbows and knees together, I'm going to put my body weight on you. This structure here, she could just hold me up as a frame. I'm not going to be able to just barrel through an elbow-knee structure. This is the fundamental shape that we use to defend ourselves in Jiu Jitsu. So whenever she's trying to craft her avenue of escape, she's always looking for pieces of an elbow-knee frame. And from the back position, the way it tends to play out is that inside elbow goes to the ground. That's the first sense of daylight that she gets. And then as I start scrambling and trying to recover the position, getting on top to side control and so forth, she completes the elbow knee position by bringing her knee into play, and that's how we end up in the half guard. Okay? So again, there's 1,010 ways to, that doesn't make sense. There's a lot of ways to get to an elbow knee frame when someone's on your back. But the real big breakthrough is when you get your inside elbow down to the floor. Okay? So we're going to do this, we're going to demonstrate this again. But what we're starting to see is a movement, we're starting to transition from mechanical partner checks where I'm doing a thing and she's trying to stop me and nothing really moves except for those tiny pieces we're studying, to a more dynamic partner check where I'm trying to accomplish something and she's trying to accomplish something, but we've really constrained it to one or two options for the two of us. That allows for us to really try and be creative and really work to make them resolve, but it's not too much for me to handle and keep in my attention, especially when the position is new for me or maybe me and my training partner. Okay, so I really like this notion of having one or two cues for me, one or two cues for M, and we start to play a game of who can make one of those happen, because we both will understand that if one of those things resolves, basically the game is over. Okay, so let's look at this again. We've got this idea that we're on our partner's back here. We've got hooks in, and I've managed my offensive grip. Maybe Emmy has a defensive grip here. She's stacked left and right in play. I go off to the side here. My idea is I want to constrain her lower body either by foot-to-foot contact or some form of body triangle. I want to be monitoring the head trap position and not losing sight of it like this and drifting away. And then I might start getting involved in like something like a hand fight where I start getting straight, double straight grips of a sort. I would like to punch this hand below her chest, start trapping her arm, and that would open up an avenue to her neck. Okay. Now, a lot of things are going on there, and as we're doing this, Em might be thinking to herself, well, if I can get this elbow down to the floor, I'm basically on my way out of here. Okay, let's just get a hair bit this way. Okay, so here we are. I've got my head trap. I've started to work these double straight grips, and at the same time, Em is starting to work her leg positioning so she can free the bottom hook, and she steps out and away. Bang, that elbow's on the ground. Now, she's just elated at this point. Okay, that's a little bit, she's maybe not elated, she's definitely made some forward progress here. She's got her elbow down to the floor, and more importantly, she knows what I'm about to do. I'm about to try and recover the top position. In some way, shape, or form, I've got to gain height with my head in order to get on top. If I were to just slump down on my shoulder, not only would she be getting out, but she could potentially get on top to the half guard, and now she's in a very, very good position. Okay, so she knows he's going to try and get his head up. So she doesn't bother with anything else other than her knee joining up to her elbow. So that whatever happens, if I go to her half guard or not, if I try to go to the side control, it doesn't matter. She has an elbow knee frame. She moves her head away from mine. Boom. And she's got back to her guard. Okay? Again, this is the way that we want to start developing the dynamic between my objectives and her objectives. She's not doing all the things that are possible. She's just going to go, I can get my inside elbow to the ground, and then I can join my elbow to my knee, and no matter how much weight goes on top of that, I'm going to be totally fine. Okay? As we continue to move forward, we will break things up in this way where we examine one of the athlete's objectives. In this case, it was the person with the back, trying to get to the strangle. How do we finish the strangle? How do we punch through defensive hands and things like this? Then we start to introduce some of the static defenses that they're going to have in place, and then some of the major cues that you should be alert to, whether you're the offensive player or the defensive player. Okay, just to say a little bit more about the general idea of offense versus defense, because the dynamic of jiu-jitsu is that very often you go from defense to offense immediately. They sort of overlap with each other. And if you think about it strategically, if Emmy was defending and was successful, and then defending and successful, and defending and successful, there's only so much defensive success you can have and still lose. Like, you're not, if you don't have that shift into an offensive mindset, all that defense doesn't really get you anywhere. So when Emmy has a sense that, okay, I'm done defending, now it's time to go on offense, there are certain changes that she's going to make in her movements. And likewise, if I'm on the offense, I start losing control of the position, she starts getting out of there, maybe she even starts to go on the offense against me. I need to be able to ensure that I don't end up underneath side control when I just had her back. That would be mortifying if that happened. I would not be able to tolerate that. So one of the main things that we're looking for to go on offense is to gain advantages in height. Okay, so right now I've got a height advantage over M because she's on her back and I'm on my knees. Now the trade-off here, just in this this given position, is M is a lot more stable than I am. Okay, it's very hard for me to tip her over. She's already tipped over, and I'm a lot more mobile than she is. So I can move around more freely, but she's able to create a structure, create a shape, and it's going to be much harder for me to pull that apart or disrupt her balance. Okay, so in a defensive mindset, the person might be okay with having their head low, and the trade-off is maybe they can create some form of a frame. Okay, and that frame is going to be used to mitigate the offensive advantage that I have, which is height. This height advantage is no good if I don't do something with it, try to make productive body contact here. So her frame keeps me from making chest-to-chest contact by keeping me on this frame here. Now, let's say that I lost the rear mount. I tried to recover the top position, and she put this elbow knee frame into place. And just for the sake of an example, let's say I just was very nervous about her guard. She's got a great triangle, and I'm just kind of wary about going into her guard, so that as she moves her head away here, maybe I backed up a little bit. This often happens. Now, M would not want to just continue sliding away, put legs between us, and then just hope that I fall over, right? This is the kind of moment when she needs to shift from successful defense to the beginnings of offense, okay? And what's a good catch-all for that? Well, start creating height in some way. Okay, so let's actually switch just here this way. So here we are again. Here's the elbow knee frame. Let's say M takes an outside step. She starts moving her head away from me like this, and she starts to line up with me here. Now, like I said before, I'm super scared of her guard. Her legs start circling over, and instead of engaging immediately with a guard pass, I start scooting back and away just slightly. Now M can start sitting up and going to an elbow prop or even a hand prop, putting her hand on the ground like this. Okay. Now you'll see she's starting to contest for height. She doesn't have a height advantage. My head is still higher than hers, but she's doing the correct thing here where she successfully defended and she stopped defending and she started attacking me. Now I'm on, in a sense, I'm on defense. Okay, I've got a height advantage, but she's beginning to create a height advantage on me. So I've got to start doing things like stripping her grips, taking away that height advantage, and now we're sort of having a back and forth offense versus defense here, the classic dynamic of guard passing and playing guard. Okay, but this is a very, very common error that's sort of it happens because you get really focused on the details of some set of mechanics, and it's easy to lose sight of the bigger picture of what you're trying to accomplish. And maybe the biggest picture goals you can have is this trade between offense and defense. Okay, so the moment she successfully creates that frame, the moment she can keep her head away from mine and sort of determine if my head gets closer or not, she has successfully defended. She's even gone a little bit further than that. She's gone center line to center line with me. So not only has she successfully defended, but now she's created the beginnings of a useful guard. So she might be able to go on offense from her back. But to keep it sort of at the same theme, she starts sitting up, she puts the elbow or hand prop on the ground, and now she's starting to go on the offense and contesting for the top position. Let's say she went even further. She brings this knee back towards her hand so that she's got a knee on the floor. And you can see now she's gaining even more of a height advantage. What if I were to stop contesting offensively? Okay, not likely to happen, but if I were to start losing head position here and bringing my head down. If M just went, oh yeah, if my head's higher than his, I'm on the right track. And she just pulls my collar and brings my head down like this. Now, things are absolutely awful for me. I can be loop choked, I can be put in a guillotine, she can start exposing my back. And it wasn't a matter of her knowing all of those techniques, but just having a very common goal, which is that change from defense to offense, the change from going from managing distance with a frame to getting her head up and above mine. Okay? So, we're starting to look at initially the idea of using a partner check. Okay, I'm doing a thing. I want to know if I'm doing it right, so I involve my partner and I have them try to resist in some very constrained way, so I can get a sense of whether or not my mechanics are on the right track. If I expect a grip to be able to hold and maintain, then she's pulling it off 100 out of 100 times. Something's going wrong. If I'm able to hold that grip with relative ease and she's having a heck of a time trying to just get any sort of purchase on my hand and break my grip, okay, I'm doing well. So we have this idea of partner checks in a constrained way with regards to grip. Started going a little bit further. What about our head trap? Can I keep my head in the right position while I start hunting for different grips? Okay. And then we started zooming out a little bit because at the beginning here, we've got a specific grip for me, so a specific partner check here. Okay, and we kept repeating this here, and she would set her grip in place. Then we started to zoom out a little bit and say, well, while you're doing that, also bear in mind that if you have your head away like this, there's other avenues for them to escape by moving their head to the side like this. So we have one very specific thing, and then we start adding a variable or two that I've got to keep track of. In this case, it was the head trap. Then we sort of zoomed about as far out as you can go. What would absolutely ruin my offense? What's one thing she could do to just totally destroy my offense, complete her defense, and allow for her to go on the offense? Get that inside elbow to the floor. Okay? So let's say the hooks are in. And we've been practicing this for a little while now. She's doing a good job with defensive hands. I've got everything in place. Now we start getting very close to positional sparring in this sense, where at any point, if M can take that inside elbow, which is going to be her right elbow when we fall to this side, if she can get that inside elbow to the floor, she's out. Okay, so anytime she can do that, she'll go ahead and do it. Bang. There's that inside elbow to the ground. Now that was more or less the same way we've been doing it up to this point, but again, it's going to help you when it comes time to spar, and you've got to improvise and adjust for the specifics of that particular scenario. So now I go, wait a minute, okay, She just did a successful inside elbow to the ground. I know she's going to try and create an elbow knee frame. At the very minimum, I've got to start bringing my head up and above hers here, and I've got some semblance of offense still. I've got the height advantage with my head. Things are not terrible. She starts to square up to me here, and I know what's coming next. She's going to start playing from guard. If I don't maintain this head position and I just allow for her to sit up, now her guard is developing, and she might end up snapping me down and bringing me into a pretty poor position here. Okay, so again, we started pretty narrow, started pretty zoomed in with this idea of a partner check on our grip, and then a partner check on our head position. Very, very narrow, very, very specific. We zoom out a little bit, and we look at this more general notion of, well, whatever stage we're in of back control, the very beginning or getting close to the end, doesn't matter where we are. She gets that inside elbow to the floor, she's out. Okay, and then zoom out again. The big change from defense to offense, or offense to defense. How do we manage that, and how do we know if we're on the right track? Well, she did a good job with the inside elbow to the ground. If I keep my head above hers, at least I'm maintaining offensive pressure. Okay? I keep my head above hers, I keep my head above hers, and she's still having to defend herself, and maybe I can get to a better position and initiate another submission. If she's able to get that elbow knee frame together, that's her defense. And then she can start considering whether or not she's going to go on offense. Okay, let's look at this same example, but just to really drive the point home. I'll point out how this can sort of go wrong, even though it's up to this point, it's really gone well. So let's say that M is kind of in side control here. Side control. So we're going knees and chest to chest. And let's check. And all right. Okay. So I'm underneath the side control here. Let's say, can I just lift up completely? That I was able to get, I'll just straighten my leg up so you can see this, an elbow knee frame in position. Here's a really common mistake. I get my elbow knee frame in position like this, and then the person just from here, they start to move away, and their partner starts to back away, and they just stay like this. Okay? The moment her head starts to recede away from me, I start to come up. And once I start to come up, I keep going up with my head until she does something about it. Okay? So often people will get their guard recovered and they, oh, I'm out of here, and they just are content to have their guard back. But think about it from the perspective of scoring in Jiu Jitsu. If I was underneath side control, we just started there, and I recovered my guard, and then I did not start to sit up, and she did anything to pass my guard, I'm now losing by 3 points. Okay, so my successful defense, my super great elbow knee frame, my excellent guard recovery, I lost. Okay, that's no good. So the idea here is that you want to know when it's time to go from defense to offense, and that there has to be this sense of overlap between them instead of a gap that separates them, because it's always in that gap that the other person is operating and getting ahead of you again. And let me just say a couple of words about scoring when it comes to training with your partner, because one of the things I want to really try and emphasize is when you're working with your partner, and I'm not there to just you wrong or that right. Like, how are you going to manage this? One way to do this is to allow yourself to use the scoring system to keep track of how well you did in a round, or how you're making progress on a day-to-day or week-to-week basis. Now, what I don't mean is I sweep Em in a round of sparring, and the bell rings. 2 points, I win. But instead, I want you to think about it like this. As Em and I get better and better and better, I'm going to have less of a overall just skill advantage over her. I'm not going to be able to just overwhelm her with skill forever. We're going to get closer to being even, and so it's less likely that I'll get just 45 submissions in a round against her, and it might get to 10 submissions, it might get to 2 submissions, and then I'm really working to get 1 submission against her, and then we start hitting parity, and I'm not submitting her, she's not submitting me, and around that point, there's a complacency in our are analysis that we have to avoid. Okay, just because I didn't submit M or she didn't submit me doesn't mean that significant things didn't happen in the round. Okay, one of the most significant things that can happen is somebody passes the other person's guard. Now, I don't think I'm alone in saying this. I think probably a lot of black belts would agree with me, and other people with legitimate positions on this, that having your guard passed is basically like getting submitted. And at first it might not seem like that, but I'm just going to say, trust me on this one, getting your guard passed is horrible. Like, up all night, like, oh, I can't, how, sort of thing. Like, you cannot tolerate somebody passing your guard. And passing and playing guard takes up the majority of your time in jiu-jitsu because you're very close to even. Neither one of you really has a distinct advantage over the other. So if you're close in skill with another person and there's not a lot of submissions happening, don't think that, oh yeah, no one submitted each other, so that round's a throwaway. No. If somebody passed the other person's guard, you should treat it like that was a submission, because that will give you the proper priority for the importance of guard recovery, the importance of guard maintenance, and this sort of idea where if somebody passes your guard, it's because you were absolutely out of resources. There was nothing else you could do, because the reality is, once somebody passes your guard, there's nothing else you can do. If they have a good sense of what's going on, there's a reason they want to pass your guard. It's because once that's done, the game is more or less over, and it's just a matter of time before the submission occurs. It might take a while, but your big advantage that you had, which was your stable spine on the floor and your leg press engaging your partner, that is now gone. And so you don't really have any of those advantages left, and they will eventually grind you out and submit you. So if you and your partner are not submitting each other, let's put guard passing on the table as basically an equivalent to a submission. That will help reorganize whatever your current thinking was into the right perspective as to, I'm never going to get my guard passed, and I'm actually going to be very persistent in trying to pass the other person's guard. Now, very much related to that is the idea of conceding a sweep. Okay, I'll give you an example of what that looks like. Have you do a seated guard. Yeah, so let's say M is, let's actually scoot just a hair bit back. Okay, so I'm in some form of guard passing, and M is playing guard of some sort. And let's say I just am not very comfortable passing guard. I'm more of a guard player. This happens all the time at blue and purple belt, more or less. So I might interpret some form of offense from her as just absolutely threatening and dangerous and sit down to the floor. You do not want to make this a habit. Okay, let's say M grabs my collar here and she starts pulling on my collar, and I just don't know if it's a collar drag or an ankle pick, or I don't know what's going to happen here. And so as she pulls, I start pulling away, and I just get the slightest whiff that she's going to grab my ankle here. And as she grabs my ankle, I sit down to the ground. Okay, now this is, first of all, that should just be preposterous to you that somebody touched your leg and you sat down to the floor. Okay, but in terms of scoring, if she gets a height advantage, she gets her head up, she's going to score 2 points if I don't get back up. Now, the reason this is important to point out is because if we're just friends sparring or whatever it is, there's no referee going like this and the scoreboard is tallying up points against you and people are going, ooh, that's not happening. So we've got to be able to maintain some sort of internal consistency here where this is recognized as a loss. And I don't mean that just in a tournament sense. I mean that tactically, mechanically, this was not a good exchange for me. I gained nothing, and she had a minimal expenditure to get to this point. She's got a good grip on my lapel. She's the beginning of a guard pass. Okay. Now the reason this happens is maybe more psychological than mechanical, and again, it has to do with the fact that I might be more inclined to playing guard and sort of looking for reasons to go to my guard. So the slightest pull here, I resist, I sense an ankle pick coming. Oh, great, I get to play guard now. Right? Try to avoid allowing that to happen. The way you would want to go about that is if I'm on top here, and again, we're close to equal, there's not a lot of submissions, and maybe I do need to go to my A game to play guard. What I need to do is either remove her grip, and then I can begin to pull guard and attack, or I need to go for a submission on her and draw her into my guard. Okay, that might mean jumping over and trying to latch on with a triangle. That might mean attacking her foot and sitting down to the floor. But it has to be an offensive movement for me that produces a guard position. It can't be an offensive movement from her that forces me to concede to the guard position. Okay, it could happen like I just showed here. And then the other sort of common place this happens, can you move this just a bit? If you mind down, is somebody might be in a position like this and they're starting to work their way around the corner in this kind of position. And as they go to the side, they run into a frame like this and they just sit down and the other person starts to get up. And then I'm off on the side going, don't fall! Yeah. Okay. But just be aware of this, because if somebody's not calling it out to you, it can be very easy to sort of fall into this kind of psychological pitfall where my desire to play guard overcomes my better judgment of I'm supposed to maintain a height advantage. That's the true offensive position here. Okay, and this is all under this umbrella of partner checks. How can my partner and I work together while we spar to make sure that we're sort of making this steady progress? If M catches me doing any of that disgusting falling to guard stuff, she calls me out on it. Okay. If she passes my guard, happens all the time. She just bow fire, pass my guard. She passes my guard, holds me in the side control, and the timer goes off. That's basically a submission. We will both understand that as a submission. We don't want to go, ha, you didn't get that Americana. Someone passes your guard. You cannot tolerate that. And that's sort of, again, this like zoomed out, bigger picture, more dynamic analysis between you and your partner. Whereas where we started was very narrow, very specific, this mechanical inclination. Can you overcome my grip with your hand? Can you get your head around my head? And you can see that, maybe those are the part of this example. It's like atomic or molecular analysis of it versus just the overall grander picture of, I'm going to lose the metaphor here, but you see where I'm going with this. All of these are in play, all of these different ways of interpreting what's going on. They're all relevant. It's hard to do all of them all the time in every round. So just dividing them up for you a little bit and saying, hey, guard passing. Don't be casual about letting your guard get passed. Sitting to guard. You cannot have somebody playing guard and then you just play guard. Be especially wary of this if you like to play guard, because it's going to be tempting to go to your guard. And then again, one more time going through, making sure that at each step that we've looked at, whether it's with grip, whether it's with head position, whether it's with inside elbow position, that you're absolutely able to develop your grip, have your partner resist, and you're able to maintain that positioning. Okay? You don't want to start building on top of a shaky platform where you got a very kind of tenuous grip, your head position starting to drift away, and then you'll never really know why the submission didn't work. There's too many things going wrong for you to pick one thing from that pile. That's more or less what I wanted to cover for today. We're going to continue to revisit partner checks at these different levels of analysis as we go through the other positions in Jiu-Jitsu. And it will most likely be in this sort of format where introduce the offense, introduce the defense, introduce the partner drills and the partner checks, and then maybe wrap them all up in a review, just so we're really solidifying that information, and then we'll sort of move on to the next unit. Are there any questions from the folks out there whose names I'm not going to say, because who does that? That's not very good conduct. Did you have any questions, Mr. or Mrs.? Good to see you, by the way.
Question about the lapel grip.
Yeah.
Do you need to put that before you get the inside elbow out?
So, can you say that one more time?
If the person on offense has a lapel grip,
yeah.
Do I need to break that grip before I try to get my inside elbow down to the ground?
That's a great question. So the short answer is no, and the inside elbow is a great reference because you can get your inside elbow to the ground without breaking the grip. It might be something like the grip loosens slightly. That's kind of common. It might be something like the elbow ends up going over the head like this. Other times, if the inside elbow goes to the floor, this grip actually just unravels as a result of the inside elbow going to the ground. It's a great question because you sort of see that the inside elbow, when that gets to the floor, it takes over any sort of grip dominance that I had. It just completely nullifies it, right? And I'm going to try and make the cues exactly like that, where if they have grips A, B, and C, doesn't matter. You get inside elbow to the ground, you're out. Does that make sense? Cool. Was there anything else on from today? All right. Okay, so we'll call it here for today. I've been working to put up these lessons. The first one is up right now, but I'll get the other ones up very soon. And if you have specific questions, I'm more than happy to circle back on any of these lessons and revisit, clarify, all that sort of thing. I would really like to make it so that over time we sort of have a good reference that we can refer to for all the various positions we're going to, and then so if things are missing or unclear, we can always clarify them. Good to see you today.